The installation of THAAD has begun in the Republic of Korea. At the same time, the Trump administration has said it wants tougher economic sanctions and diplomatic pressure put on the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We'll be looking at what America is trying to achieve on the Korean Peninsula. And here in China, fast and efficient express delivery services have changed people's shopping habits. What's behind their meteoric growth, and will it set a pattern for the rest of the world? Welcome to The Point. I'm Li Xin. On Wednesday, vehicles carrying U.S. missile defense equipment arrived at a site in the south of the Republic of Korea. It signals the start of the installation of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD system. On the same day, the Trump administration said it aimed to push the DPRK into dismantling its nuclear and missile programs through tougher economic sanctions and diplomatic pressure, but remains open to negotiations to bring that about. How should we interpret the latest U.S. stance on the DPRK? Why is the U.S. so bent on deploying THAAD in the Republic of Korea, and will it be followed by deployments of this system in other Asian countries? I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Professor Zhu Chenghu from the PLA National Defense University. Welcome to the show, Professor Zhu. Now, last night, in the middle of the night, 18 trucks carrying these defense equipment and guarded by some 8,000 troops amid protesting crowds. Why do you think the U.S. wants to speed up the deployment of this system?
It is because of the afraid that the Americans are afraid that with the new president elected, they might be opposed to sort of deployment. If you look at the leading candidates of ROK, we can see both of the two leading candidates are opposed to those sort of deployment. At least they will have to re-examine the deployment. Therefore, they want to create the effect there, and they have deployed there. Mm-hmm. So it will be very, very difficult for the new president to remove it from ROK. So this is they want to de facto deployment. So this is very important for the United States.
Now, we have talked about this before, but again, I want to ask you, some people in the United States says that the THAAD is a purely defensive system. However, China and Russia are firmly against it. Is it purely a defensive system in your eyes?
No, we can say that no system is purely defensive. Actually, THAAD system is not intended for the protection of ROK and the U.S. forces in ROK. It is because it's THAAD, high altitude, high altitude, yes, terminal high altitude air defense system. So it has a capability of detecting the missile at a height of about 200 kilometers. The DPRK will launch such missiles against the ROK or U.S. forces in ROK. So that's impossible. Therefore, we would argue that it is mainly intended to reduce the credibility of the strategic deterrence of China and that of Russia in Okhotsk Sea and in the Far East. So this is the major purpose of the deployment.
Now, over 3 years ago, you already envisaged that the THAAD system would be deployed on the Korean Peninsula. What made you think back then?
Because I don't think ROK and the president of ROK have the capability to stop the deploying of the THAAD system.
Because it was something that the United States wanted to push for.
Yes, it is because that the United States, especially the military of the United States, are determined to deploy this system in this area so as to create some troubles on the Korean Peninsula, and this will provide the conditions for the Americans to consolidate its presence in the peninsula, on the peninsula.
Do you think the situation can be turned around still?
I don't think so.
So it's going to be a reality for China. Now, China has said, and the latest statement from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs is China will take resolute measures to oppose it. What measures could China take in this regard?
Well, I think we can take different measures. One is the economic measures, as we have witnessed in the past few months. And the other is the military measures. I think we will have to take countermeasures against this sort of deployment. And I think, technically speaking, it's not very difficult for the Chinese to deploy attacking missiles or cruise missiles or even aircraft to destroy this sort of deployment in case a war breaks out between China and the United States or between China and the ROK. So it's pretty easy.
Do you think China should do it?
No, we will not necessarily have the preemptive strike against this system. But in case a war breaks out, I think that's a must. We will have to first of all destroy this system. Otherwise, the strategic deterrence capability and credibility will be seriously damaged by this sort of deployment.
Where do you see the THAAD system being deployed next, now that and if it really gets completely installed in the Korean Peninsula? Where else do you see it emerging?
I think this is not the last deployment in East Asia. I think this is only the beginning of the deployment of THAAD system in East Asia. And the next one will be Japan. I think Japan has declared that it will accept the deployment of THAAD system in their territory. And of course, it will sometimes we'll have to look into the future, the change of the relationship between China on the one hand and those countries on Southeast Asia on the other. For example, the relations between China and the Philippines. I really wonder if the present president steps out, and I don't know what the situation will be between China and the Philippines. I don't know if the Philippines will turn over to the United States and they will negotiate deployment. Of course, I don't think there is no possibility at all for the Americans to deploy it in Taiwan, which is a part of China. But I think they will not deploy it by itself, but they will persuade Taiwanese to buy them and deploy it.
So the United States, if you draw the lines, what the United States wants to do is create a chain of this missile defense systems containing China in this part of the world. Is that what they're trying to do?
Yes, that's a must. I think it is a very important component of the strategic deployment of the United States, and also a very important component of the deployment of missile defense systems in the world of the United States.
So the situation doesn't look very optimistic in your eyes.
You are right.
And what can we do about it?
So we will have to take some countermeasures and make preparations. I don't think it's very difficult for us to destroy this sort of system in case of war breaks out.
At this particular moment, let's not worry too much down in the future. At this moment, will the deployment of THAAD or the beginning of the deployment of THAAD have any negative effect on the volatile situation on the Korean Peninsula?
Of course, it's very, very destructive. I think it will arouse the opposition from the DPRK. On the other hand, it is a very, very destructive factor to the strategic stability, not only between the United States and Russia, but also between China and the United States. And this is not constructive at all.
Now, on Wednesday, the U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, Secretary of Defense James Mattis, and Director of Intelligence Don Coase released a joint statement about the DPRK issue. In that statement, they said the core message of U.S. President Donald Trump's approach aims to pressure North Korea into dismantling its nuclear ballistic missile and proliferation programs by tightening economic sanctions and pursuing diplomatic pressure with our allies and regional partners. The United States seeks stability and the peaceful denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And however, we remain prepared to defend ourselves and our allies. And in response, the DPRK had this to say. Let's take a listen.
조선반도에서 전쟁이 터진다면 Once war breaks out on the Korean Peninsula, no matter who started, the U.S. will have to be blamed. The U.S. is not satisfied with current hostile policies against us. They deployed a number of strategic weapons to the peninsula.
Now, Professor Hu, seeing that message, does it surprise you? Or, I mean, it seems that they have come again to the kind of political solution or diplomatic solution after talking very harsh about, possible military strikes on the DPRK.
I think if the Americans approach to take a diplomatic solution, I don't think the situation on Korean Peninsula would have developed to the present situation. And I think the Americans only believe in the strength, the military capabilities and the economic sanctions. Actually, we are not short of sanction on DPRK. Now, what kind of sanctions can work? This is a problem. I think the best way for us to resolve the nuclear issue on Korean Peninsula is to talk. Without talk, I don't think the problem can be addressed.
Do you think under the current situation, is there any possibility that any talks can be restarted anytime soon?
I think if it can start, it will be the best. It will provide an opportunity for all of us. I don't think at the present time the DPRK will accept any intimidation and the pressure from the outside.
As you can tell from what that presenter was saying and the tone of his voice. Anyway, we have to leave it there. Professor Zhu Chenghu from the PLA National Defense University. And here is my point. I think it's a good sign that at least the United States is talking about diplomatic means that's not against the spirit of the UN, that's in line, let's say, with the spirit of the series of UN Security Council resolutions. And that is also what China has been calling for all along. However, that does not mean China will agree to more multilateral sanctions at the UN, because there comes a point where a cornered country has nowhere else to turn and violence becomes all but inevitable. So while the situation on the Korean Peninsula seems to have eased slightly at each turn of the screw, I can't help feeling that the region is still heading further into untested waters. It's high time everyone pause for thought before passing a point of no return. Welcome back. Thanks to fast and convenient express delivery services in China, online shopping has become a part of my life, and it's not just me. According to a new report released by the China State Post Bureau, in 2016, 1 in 8 people in China used express deliveries per day. The volume of China's express deliveries surpassed 30 billion pieces, ranking first in the world and accounting for nearly half of the global total. How has China's express industry developed so fast in the past few years, and what are the requirements for Chinese couriers competing in the global market? I'm joined from London by Mark Baston, visiting professor at China's University of International Business and Economics; from Paris by Duncan Clark, chairman of BDA China, an investment consulting firm; and in Beijing by Professor Huo Deming of the National School of Development of Peking University. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. Professor Huo, let me come to you first. What do you think are the factors that have driven China's express industry to grow so fast?
Well, this is an increase in return to scale at the current stage. So the cost of productions, or the cost of transportation is declining. The urban rate is 26%, which means a lot of unemployed rural workers. And also, internet shopping is just the beginning of the Chinese life. So everything is looking good. It's an increasing return to scale.
Mr. Clark, how do you compare the development of the Chinese express industry with foreign countries? We know some 10 years ago, for instance, Europe, let's say Finland, was leading the pack, and how come they've fallen behind and China seemed to have overtaken everybody?
Well, I think as the professor just said, the e-commerce market in China is growing faster than anybody had forecast, and actually more Chinese shop online than their American equivalents or UK equivalents, which had been the high watermark before. So it's really e-commerce leading the way. I wrote a book on Alibaba and I talk about this, the iron triangle, as Jack Ma calls it, between logistics, finance and shopping. These three things together drive each other forward. So it is this incredible habit now of buying everything online, including also food delivery as well as products.
Yeah, Mr. Bastin, now in the past, express delivery was related to postal services, while now, as we have heard from these gentlemen, it's almost always combined with e-commerce. How do you look at the change, and what role do you think e-commerce had played on boosting the express delivery market?
Well, obviously, it's got a lot to do with e-commerce. I mean, the express parcels market has grown proportionally with e-commerce, and as the other panelists have said, that there's been an explosion in that, with Chinese consumers now shopping online more and more and for more and more variety of goods. I think there's a trust in e-commerce and an emotional connection there that the Chinese consumer has found that we haven't seen in America as much, and certainly in Europe. And I think that explains what we're seeing now. And obviously, the logistics industry, the supply chain industries really need to catch up, and those players in the market now really need to look very, very carefully at their entire operation, and supply chain management is really very, very important.
Mr. Huo, what do you think of the trust factor that Mike just mentioned? Do you find it the reason why that a lot of Chinese people love shopping online, and they almost stay at home and without leaving their home and just shopping online? What do you think of that?
Well, I do shopping online, but I do enjoy seeing the window shopping, so to speak. So I'm not really dedicated to internet shopping, but I find it's very, very convenient, especially 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when I really couldn't fall asleep. And I also realized that when I make a purchase at that moment, and then maybe in the noon at the same day, I could receive whatever I have ordered. That's really a surprise in my life.
And you don't even have to, you know, get dressed properly, get ready to walk out, and spend time on the subway and the traffic jam and all of that. So
well,
indeed,
I do have to dress properly to accept to take in the commodities.
Well, a lot of people accept the deliveries in their pajamas. I think that,
I'm not to that stage yet, but I do enjoy the speed of shopping. I always said the fastest speed is the speed of light, but I'm thinking that the internet shopping in China is going to surpass the law of the speed of light.
Well, Mr. Clark, now the Chinese Prime Minister Li Keqiang pointed out that express delivery is a representative of or an example of the new economy, and it has stimulated consumption as well as promoting production. Why is express delivery regarded as a new business model? What do you think of that?
Well, a part of delivery is the packages, but it's also the data and all the intelligence coming from all of these deliveries, which is the same also for all the online payments that are involved. So stimulating all this data as well is a big part of the equation. So this is increasingly we will look to in the future robotics and things like that, but for the time being we do have a surplus of labor. That will dry up, but this with data as the underpinning, we will be in a better position, I think, to move to robotic delivery in the future.
Mr. Bastin, now in 2016, the total revenue of online sales supported by express delivery reached more than 4 trillion yuan, or $580 million US dollars. That's about 12.5% of the total social consumption of retail goods. How are the Chinese traditional retailers coping with the new competition, in your observation?
Well, I think they're trying to react very, very quickly. I think it has taken them by storm to a certain extent, and there are a lot of new players with low barriers to entry that have taken the market by storm, so that they're trying to reposition themselves and position themselves more online. But there's a lot to do, and I think that the key now is really getting that logistics operation, tight integrated supply chains that cover a vast geographical region across the China mainland, that the new players really have cornered the market with. So it's a very, very interesting time. We will see a shakeout in the market, and we will see a lot of 19,000 courier companies at the moment in China. We'll see far fewer dominate. The major traditional retailers really will need to look to work very closely with them and form long-lasting partnerships. Just to echo a point made previously, I talked about trust. I think it is the need for convenience as well that really is a typically Chinese thing with very, very densely populated urban environments. That need for convenience is driving this much more than it is, say, across Europe.
Well, do you think that the change in people's consumption behavior or shopping behavior can change the streets as we know them? Will you envisage a day when you no longer have bricks and mortar stores?
That's a very good point, and that's a point that's been pondered here in the Western Europe as well. I don't think we'll see a complete replacement. I think we'll see the two working together. Obviously, as shopping is sophisticated, and as the professor and the jury just said, there's a certain amount of enjoyment that goes with that. That is a threat to the traditional retail environment, the bricks and mortar that consumers across all cultures enjoy very much, hedonistic shopping. I think that will continue, particularly for luxury products where there's a real need to be in the store and really experience and get some advice. But I think the two can coexist, but online shopping I think will continue to increase.
Professor Huo, now what do you think is the biggest downside of the boom of online shopping?
Well, it could be a bubble.
A bubble.
Especially when this everything looks so good, so marvelous. As I said, it's increasing return scale. But remember, it's impossible for every industry, or even this online shopping industry, Korean industries, always increasing return scale. That's just unlikely. So whenever people are overzealous, over enthusiastic about this business, then everybody, well, VCs, venture capital, will pour in, and then we'll probably see. I don't want to see bubbles happen over there. Now, of course, whenever we have an unmanned aerial vehicle appeared in that industry, for instance, in the United States, has already done that, and then I will conclude that increasing return scale probably is ended. And of course, that go back to the normal case. But before that, bubbles is probably the worst things I can imagine.
Mr. Clark, what is your opinion on this? What could be the most important downside of this?
Well, the professor's right to point out there's probably too much capital actually flooding around China and also the technology industry globally. But I do think that consumer habits have changed for all the reasons we've heard. We're not going to go backwards, I think. Offline commerce in China wasn't actually that efficient before, or even that prized by consumers. So the question is, where are we going to from here? What kind of services as well as products are we going to be buying online? And are there new ways of delivering them, in fact, more environmentally responsibly for those products as well? So there are going to be challenges from the sheer scale of this. Already 1 out of 8 users are using this every day. That's a huge number in the Chinese population.
Mr. Baston, your take on this?
I think certainly there are ethical concerns, and sustainability very much is at the fore here. Overconsumption, depletion of natural resources. There's a real fanaticism now when it comes to online shopping, and there's a real danger that overconsumption can really put pressure on the sustainability of the industry and general pressure on the Chinese economy when there is a real question mark against ethics and sustainability and preservation of natural resources. So I think that needs to be looked at.
Well, what do you think of this environmental aspect of this, Professor Huo? I don't know whether you have ever noticed that, for instance, when you are shopping online, the packaging is particularly solid, meaning, extra layers of packaging, and everything you buy comes with a packaging. And because you buy so much, there is also so much packaging that's been used and thrown away. Is environmental pollution a potential concern for you?
A question for me?
Yes, Professor Huo.
Okay. Oh, yes, I did. I did notice that. Whenever I order something, I always throw away more than I get.
Yeah.
That's a rule. That's a rule. I hate it.
But some people are saying that the more you consume in the packaging industry, the more you generate for recycling.
We will reflect on that. I don't think people are that dumb. People are like me. When I've taken a little and throw out more, that's not right. That's not something that need to be corrected.
Okay, the other two gentlemen, Mr. Clark, maybe a very quick concluding remark.
Yes, I think that the customer is king in China today, and people would rather not have damaged packages. But this needs to change, because particularly the plastic tape, which is used to seal this stuff, is not recyclable. But there is a commitment to get to at least half of recyclable goods within the next few years. But we have to move towards recycling quickly.
Yes. Mr. Baston, your thoughts very quickly.
I think an acceptance across the Chinese public that more and more packaging doesn't necessarily make the gift more and more attractive. You don't need to double the size of the packaging to double the perception of benefit to the recipient. Oh, for functional reasons, yes, but the emotional aspect of packaging, I think, again, is a very Chinese thing, where we see packaging that's ridiculously over the top, and that really is environmentally damaging and a cause for concern.
Okay, thank you very much. We have to leave it there. That were Mike Baston, visiting professor at China's University of International Business and Economics, Duncan Clark, chairman of BDA China, and Professor Huo Deming from the National School of Development of Peking University. Well, here is my take of this topic. Well, I enjoy the convenience of online shopping, but also like the days when I can forget about my cell phone and stroll down a shopping street and be pleasantly surprised by something that just jumps into my view. Of course, if you're a man watching this, you might well disagree with me. As with many other phenomena in China, when it happens, it does so on a very big scale. So that can be both good and bad. I'm too powerless on my own to worry about the future of an industry, but I know that ideally I want to keep a balance between my digital life and my real life. If everyone thinks the same way, then that probably means slower growth for the delivery industry, but in the long run, it could be a much more sustainable way for us all to live. And that's it for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. And you can watch our previous shows on the CGTN channel of YouTube. Click on the playlist and look for The Point with Liu Xin. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow at the same time.